The Christmas spirit is that hope which tenaciously clings to the hearts of the faithful and announces, in the face of any Herod the world can produce, and all the indoors slammed in our faces, and all the dark nights of our souls, that with God all things still are possible, that even now unto us a child is born.
Hello again, everyone. I am sitting here in the Rainbow Pastor's office or study. I don't call it my office because it's the Rainbow Pastor's office. Others have graced the space before me and others will after me, so it is the Rainbow Pastor's study. So I came to this office on Monday morning, after a week of rest and play and fun. And I sat down. I was having some meetings with my colleagues. And all of a sudden I looked down and saw what a mess my nativity table was. Mark wondered if there had been an earthquake because all the figures were topsy-turvy and looking rather tired, and meltdowns everywhere, it seemed. The kings just toppled over. Even the livestock seemed to be done. I had to smile because some of us, many of us probably feel that way post week of Christmas and New Year, feeling a little worn down, topsy-turvy, even though we've maybe had a break from regular routines. Starting up again always feels stressful. So perhaps we can relate. I know this week has been full of headlines that have occupied our attention, and I know I stayed up late Tuesday night watching the Georgia results come in, and of course the turmoil that continues here in the U.S. and around the world, really regarding the pandemic and the politics that continue to be a source of divide and pain and violence. It is a tradition among many Christians to wait until the week of Epiphany. Epiphany is January 6th, 12 days after Christmas. It is a tradition for many to wait until now to put away the Christmas decorations for the year. So I will soon box these up for another year. I've decided this year I'm going to leave the magi out, and as well as this nativity. I'll be sharing more about this. It's the most provocative one I have. It's one I bought in Bethlehem when I was there back in 2013. It shows the wall that continues to divide peoples and be such a source of violence and pain. If the Magi came today, they would not have reached the birthplace of Christ. So, like I said, I'll be talking more about this. Here at the church, we've started putting away the decorations, but again, we'll leave the Magi out because they're going to be a source of conversation and hopefully inspiration in the coming weeks. So every year when we go about putting Christmas away, I think of Anne Weems' wonderful writing called "Boxed." Let me share this with you. So I'm quoting her. I must admit to a certain guilt about stuffing the Holy Family into a box in the aftermath of Christmas. She thinks back to when she gets them out every year in Advent. She refers to it as releasing them from the year's imprisonment box in the dark of their basement. Out they come, she says, one by one, struggling through the straw, last year's tinsel still clinging to the robes. Nevertheless, they appear, ready to take their place again in the light of another Christmas. The child is always first, she says, because he's the one I'm most reluctant to box. Attached forever to his cradle, he emerges, apparently unscathed from the time spent upside down to avoid the crush of the lid. His mother still gazes adoringly, in spite of the fact that her features are somewhat smudged. Joseph has stood for 11 months, holding valiantly what's left of his staff, broken 20 Christmases ago by a child who hugged him a little too tightly. The shepherds tumble forth, followed by 3 sheep in very bad repair. And the wise ones, the Magi, still travel, though not quite so elegantly, the standing camel having lost its back leg and the sitting camel having lost 1 ear. However, gifts intact, they are ready to move. Here they all are again, she says. Not exactly a grand set. Well, then she, again, thinks about putting them away again. And she says this: "This year, when it's time to pack the figures away, we'll be more careful that the peace and goodwill are not also boxed for another year." May it be so. Well, like I said, we're going to leave the Magi out for a couple weeks here as we explore the season of Epiphany. So the Magi, they're not characters we always zoom in on. Many of us probably just associate them with the We Three Kings carol. These are likely educated magi, so think magicians or astrologers, even fortune tellers. Matthew, the writer of the Gospel Matthew, says they came from the east. Perhaps that meant Babylon or Persia or Arabia. We don't know how many of them traveled. We know that they presented 3 gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. I often, as a pastor, get this as a gift. My friends think they're being really religious by giving me, a pastor, this. I love it, by the way. Many people have taken this to mean there were 3 magi, right, presenting 3 gifts, but we don't know for sure. But it is likely that these were men of wealth and learning. They had the means to study the stars and the signs. And likely they knew, or that they studied the Jewish scriptures. So they knew of the signs and the prophecies, such as Isaiah 9, 2. I'll show this here. Isaiah 9, 2, 6, and 7. With this prophecy in mind, they undertook this journey. They went to great lengths to find this child of promise and light. And so let's now hear and see this story unfolding in Matthew chapter 2. And we're going to do this by watching what Karen and Tim and Esther and Emmeline created for the Christmas program, using Matthew 2 as their guide. So let's watch and listen to this story.
After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him."
Esther was the mastermind behind the art and the figurines, the clay figurines, and we're actually going to hear from Esther in a little bit here. I interviewed her for today's sermon. So the story goes that the Magi first, as they were following the star, they first went to Jerusalem to visit with King Herod the Great, to ask him what he knows. Probably common sense that he'd go to a center like Jerusalem, a palace. That's where kings are born, or that's where the information is, right? Why would they go to Bethlehem, which is miles down the road and not a significant center? Kings aren't born in rural mangers, right? So they visit with King Herod. Some refer to King Herod as Rome's puppet tyrant, who was assigned to be the king of the Jews. So this is a title given to him by Rome. King Herod wouldn't have even been fully Jewish, so he was not well liked or respected at all in the eyes of Jewish leaders and people. He's known to be a powerful and yet heartless man, reputation for stealing, for torturing, assassinating opponents, even members of his own family, without hesitation, would hold daily executions. So we shouldn't be surprised that upon hearing from the Magi that there was a new king of the Jews born, he would be filled with rage and jealous fear. But he's also cunning and tries to, sweet talk his way into finding out more information about this child, and tells the Magi, he hopes to pay homage to this new king too, so they should return once they find him. But if we read on, we know that they do not. These Magi defy King Herod's marching orders. They having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they returned home by another way, by perhaps a road less traveled. Of course, we can think of Robert Frost's wonderful poem, I do every year when we think of the Magi. Let's listen to Steve Goeke reading this wonderful poem and just help us think about this moment, this epic moment when the Magi turned and began down another road.
The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler long, I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair and perhaps having the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet, knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference.
Magi taking the road that they did certainly made all the difference. And we're going to read on in the coming weeks of, we celebrate the defiance of the Magi, but it also led to such a brutal murder rampage led by King Herod. And so while we lift up the Magi and their defiance, we also grieve the loss of life, the violence that still results even from people trying to do the right and good, brave thing. So we're going to hold all of that together in the coming weeks with more reflections to come. For now, I guess I just want to alert everyone that I'm going to be on the lookout for stories and examples of people here among us, people, everyday people who will never make the world global headlines, but who are seeking those roads less traveled. Who are showing up with courage and bravery in their professions, not perfectly, but trying to show up and be mindful of the marching orders that may or may not lead to abundant life for us and for those we care about. For those who are most vulnerable. So to me, this story is an invitation for us all to really be more mindful of what roads we're walking down. And through through these next few weeks, I also want us to be mindful. I'm certainly going to try to be mindful of the fact that the Magi didn't travel alone. They were together as a group. I think to take these roads less traveled, we can't always do it alone, and in fact, it's best not to try often. Sometimes we need to break away from the crowd to do the right and good thing, but to have companions nurturing that spirit and that courage is also so important. So let's keep that in mind. So my example for today, someone I want to lift up, who is, I think, on her way to being mindful about roads less traveled, and that's Esther. So like I said, Esther Walker is my special guest today. Right before Christmas, Esther and her sister Emmeline and mom Karen stopped by the church and gave me a gift, and I'll show it here. It's a t-shirt that says "Good Trouble," and Esther actually designed this lettering. And along with it was a card. Clearly, their Christmas gifts were inspired by John Lewis, the great senator, the civil rights icon, who passed away here in 2020. Well, as I told Esther, and you'll hear us here in a bit, many of us grew up with the notion that to be a Christian meant to be good. You know, people who stay out of trouble, who behave in good and proper ways. To be a Christian for many of us meant to follow the rules, to respect those in charge, to be truthful, and just, again, to stay out of trouble. But I think many of us realize at some point, Esther's realizing this, I think, at a pretty early age, that we also must be discerning about which rules might actually be in error, and to be discerning and mindful about who is giving the marching orders and which actually need to be defied and broken. So here's my conversation with Esther about these things. I'm here with Esther. Can you show me the clay figures that you made?
These are just the magi. I couldn't find Herod.
Well, that's good. Herod wasn't very nice. Keep him away. What did you make them out of?
I used polymer clay.
Well, I thought your video was just delightful. I recently bought a nativity scene for my parents made in Africa. So many of the nativities that I certainly grew up seeing all were white-skinned figures. You chose a darker clay. Was that on purpose?
Sort of. I tried to get kind of where they were from incorporated into the color.
If your mom, the reading that she did left off my favorite sentence in that whole story, or she ended right before that, and that's maybe she talked to you about it. The fact that the Magi didn't do as King Herod told them to do. They went back home another way. And so I guess I put that together with this wonderful quote or saying from John Lewis. I think the Magi maybe were examples of people who were, I don't know, doing some good trouble. What do you think?
Yes, I definitely say that.
Tell me, when did you first learn about John Lewis?
I had seen the movie Selma Lord Selma, and after that, I believe I was in 3rd grade, and after that, my mom said there was a book, so I got that, and that was the first time I'd ever heard of him.
In 1 or 2 sentences, who was John Lewis?
He was a civil rights activist and senator. He was hit in the head on Bloody Sunday, and he had his skull fractured for that.
Yeah, he put his life on the line a lot of times for what he believed and what he believed America could be, right? Do you have a favorite quote?
Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful, be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or a year. It is the struggle of a lifetime. Never ever be afraid to make some noise and get into good trouble, necessary trouble.
And I believe this was a tweet from June 2018, so not that long ago. So one of the things I've been thinking about is we're told, I know when I was your age, I think I got a lot of messages to not be a troublemaker. That to get in trouble was seen as a bad thing, right? It meant you were grounded, or you had to take a time out, or you were being bad or dishonest or mean. That's what being in trouble meant. So it's such an interesting phrase. And you did such a nice job of designing or expressing it through this t-shirt. Can you think of other figures that inspire you who are causing some good trouble?
One who came to mind was Katherine Johnson. She was a mathematician for NASA and also made several contributions to racial equality there.
How did you learn about her?
I think I first learned about her in the movie Hidden Figures.
Yeah. So, can you read it?
I can read Well-Behaved Women Seldom Make History.
Yeah.
But
so it's probably hard to see some of the names. I'll take a picture of it, send it to you. Maybe if you ever need to do a research project, I would love to have on the back here some information about all these great women. So there's of course Rosa Parks, there's Billie Jean King, Susan B. Anthony. So I'll send it to you, and if you ever want to do a school project on it, Ruby Dee would be another one. So a church member gave this to me, and I had it up in the church office quite a while, but now that I work some from home, I decided to bring it home. These are good trouble women. Well, let's talk just a little bit about what happened yesterday, because I imagine some of the folks, mob members, saw themselves as creating good trouble, right? They were making noise. They were getting into necessary trouble for what they believed was, I don't know, right and good. So I guess that's the trouble, right? Is how do we know when the good trouble we're after is truly after the good? What are feelings that you have from yesterday? That's a big question, but
at the start, probably mostly just shock, because I mean, I have never heard of anything like the Capitol being attacked. Lots of things I haven't heard of in my life that I am now. And then also, I saw comparisons between the Black Lives Matter groups of police positioned there, and then the ones in the footage for this, and just the difference was, yeah.
That's such an important, I don't know, side by side look. And I mean, you've probably heard this from so many different people. Just it had this mob been people of color, what a different response there might have been. Yeah, I sure can't help but wonder what John Lewis would have said about what happened yesterday and what's happening in our country. He he was one of these leaders who could always tell it how it is and not shy away from being really realistic about kind of how hateful people can be, but also always kind of urging us not to sink into despair. I love that about him and so many others, how you can hold both. Have you ever written a letter to a politician?
3 times. I tried writing a letter to Donald Trump. Never worked. The last time I did get a response. Very obviously something that was copied onto every child's letter. And for a White House printer, could very easily tell that the signature was printed on there.
I'm more interested in what you said than his.
I think that was mainly about the wall at the border.
On Sunday, I'm going to show one of my favorite nativities is one I got in Bethlehem when I was there a couple of years ago. And it has surrounding Bethlehem is a huge wall separating so many peoples there in that part of the world. And so right in the middle of the nativity, there's a big wall. And so the magi in the nativity can't get to Jesus. It's kind of provocative, you know. If that story, or if the magi would come today, they wouldn't have access to Bethlehem. By the way, how did you decide on this lettering?
This year, we're kind of doing a Girl Scouts thing. We were supposed to each come up with a shirt for our troop to buy. We did not end up with this one. Instead, with one, it said, "Scouts can change the world." I get that they can, but that's what everything says. So it's getting very, very annoying. I kind of tried to make it so that the trouble would go in front of the good.
I think it has energy and some kind of, I think the trouble gives it a certain weightiness. So well done. If people at Rainbow would like a t-shirt, what should they do?
Notify my mom? I have no idea.
Okay. Karen Siebert, everyone. Well, I love the idea of a Girl Scouts troop having a t-shirt like this, but if we can't convince a Girl Scout troop, we can get some Rainbow folks in these. Have you been in good trouble?
Mostly just been in trouble for jumping off of tall structures and climbing them. So,
I think I have video of you doing that, swinging at Stephen Gale's. Have you seen that? I'll have to
don't
show.
believe I have.
I did it a slow-mo. It's actually quite fantastic. You didn't get in trouble that day.
Since this is the first Sunday after Epiphany, and we're talking about taking a different path, I'd like to take a different path musically and ask us to think about some of the carols and hymns that we sing at Christmas that maybe it's time to let go of. We keep adding more to our congregational repertoire. Maybe it's time to let a few go. One Epiphany carol that's very common that fits in this category for me is We Three Kings. This carol isn't in the New Voices Together hymnal, or in the blue hymnal that we're using now, or even in the brown 1969 hymnal. I had to go all the way back to the 1940 Mennonite hymnal to find it published. I asked Adam Tice, the text editor for Voices Together, why it was left out of the new hymnal, and he said, and I quote, "The piece was brought up as a possibility, but we ended up following the judgment of the previous Mennonite hymnals and not including it. The text isn't particularly biblically rooted. In addition, the term Orient is considered in some circles to be offensive." It's the end of the quote from Adam. So there you have it. Scripture doesn't call the visitors kings. And as David Baker says in Christian Today, the baby they're visiting isn't a resplendent man on a camel. He's a helpless baby in a manger. Before I thought about all this, we sang this piece pretty regularly at Rainbow, especially when we shared the space with the Methodist congregation and used their hymnals because it is in the Methodist hymnal. And other denominations, like the Presbyterians and the Community of Christ, they've included it in their new hymnals as well. So it's obviously not an easy decision to leave it out. But I'll offer it here and let you think about it and think about what this hymn says and how and if it really fits the Christmas story.